Hello, I'm Ryan Sandell.
And I'm Nelson Goering, and we would like to welcome you to our final session of our module on the Gothic language. In this video, we will read 2 verses from the Gospel of John to illustrate the Gothic language in action. Here is John 18:10, first in the Gothic alphabet, and then in Romanization, and finally in a phonetic transcription. Ith Simon Petrus havans heru uslokina, jak slok des ochumistens gudiant skalk, jak af memet imma oso texuo, sach than hetans was namin malchus. The Greek text here is from Robinson and Pierpont's 2005 edition of the Byzantine tradition of the Greek New Testament. It may not be an exact match for the text that the Gothic was translated from in every detail, but it's a pretty good approximation. We've also provided an English translation from the King James Version to give the general sense of the passage. Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant, and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. We start out with our first bit, ith Simon Petrus havans heru uslok ina. Ith is a conjunction. It is often mildly contrastive and translated as but it can also be a more neutral connective, just indicating a change of subject, which is its function in this case. Simon Petrus is clearly a borrowed name, and Petrus, like many non-Gothic names, has been adopted into the Gothic as a U stem noun. Havans is a present participle modifying Peter. Though not a finite verb, it functionally serves as a relative clause, Peter having a sword, or Peter who had a sword. This kind of construction is very frequent in Gothic, but is usually, as here, closely calqued on the Greek original. Morphologically, havan is a class 3 weak verb built with the derivational suffix I, which regularly surfaces simply as a in many forms. Here, it is indistinguishable from the present participle of a class 6 strong verb. Phonologically, note that spirantization applies to the underlying voiced b in the word to make it into a voiced fricative va. In heru, the object of havans, note here the application of lowering in an underlying short I to e, preceding the rhotic r. Our main verb is uslok, here in the meaning of drew. While the past tense stem makes it clear that this lexeme is a class 2 strong verb, the corresponding non-past stem luk, with a long u, is unusual for this class. We might instead have expected a non-past stem liuk, with a diphthong u. Pay attention here to the accentuation of uslok as well. The primary stress falls on lok, not on us. The object of uslok is ina, the accusative of the anaphoric pronoun, in the masculine singular to agree with heru. The finite verb in this clause is sloch, the third singular past form of slachan, strike. The long O vowel in the past tense stem alternating with a short a in the non-past gives away the membership of this verb in strong class 6. It is worth noting that this verb in Gothic has analogically leveled the voiceless h throughout the various stem forms, where in West Germanic languages there has been a tendency to level the voiced consonant from Werner's law, as in German schlagen or English slay. In the genitive phrase, this ochumistens gudiens, the adjective has weak adjectival ending ins rather than the strong ending is. This is typical for an adjective following a determiner, in this case, this. The whole phrase modifies skulk, the order, genitive, and then noun. This order is probably influenced by the Greek, where things are more independent. Gothic seems to prefer the order noun and then adjective. As discussed in the lectures on nominal morphology, gudia is a regular type of derived noun. The based word is guth, god, to which have been added the yan stem endings to form a related agent noun, in this case, person who carries out activities related to the deity, or more simply, priest. Finally, note that in the form gudiens, we again meet an instance of the application of spirantization, in this case of an underlying postvocalic da to the fricative the. Looking to the next clause, again beginning with yach, we have yach af memet imo oso texuo. Here we find a class 7 past tense strong form of af memet, cut off. The reduplication in the past tense tells us that the verb belongs to strong class 7. Note also that the reduplicant stands in between the root met and the preverb af, and that the primary stress falls on the verbal root. 2 forms in this clause show contrasting origins for diphthongal spellings in Gothic. On the one hand, the word also, ear, in the accusative, contains a long aw in its first syllable, arising from an original Proto-Germanic diphthong au. On the other hand, the word texuo contains a short resulting from the lowering of an underlying short I before an H. Morphologically, oso belongs to the fairly small class of neuter N stems, which includes a number of words for body parts. The adjective textual has a weak adjectival ending. There's no determiner to condition this, but this adjective always takes weak endings, probably for semantic reasons. Certain adjectives, such as right and left, or comparative endings, or comparative adjectives, have implied definite reference and always take weak endings to mark this. Also note the dative of possession imma rather than a genitive form like the Greek original. Gothic uses both genitives and datives for inalienable possession, but favors the dative in cases like this where the possessed object, the ear, is in some way strongly affected, especially in cases where body parts are being removed. Moving on to Sacthan hetans wasnamen malchus. We start with sach. Here we have the demonstrative pronoun sa with the clitic attached. After a vowel, the u of the clitic is deleted. The combination uchthan is often used to introduce backgrounded or parenthetical information, as here. The name is a further piece of incidental information interrupting the main narrative of events. Hetans was is a typical passive construction. The verb hetan is normally transitive to name or to call with a direct object. In the present, the synthetic passive hetada is named, could have been used, but in the past, Gothic has to employ a periphrastic construction with the past participle and an auxiliary verb. The order of participle first and auxiliary following is typical for Gothic and is not derived from the Greek Vorlage, which uses a rather different construction overall. Formally, was functions as a normal class 5 strong verb in the preterite, although the non-past forms of wisan are pretty irregular. Lastly, namen is an independent dative, not an argument of any other element in the clause. Its function is what we would traditionally call a dative of respect, meaning by name in terms of his name. And now my colleague Ryan will comment on the remaining part of our text.
Moving on now to 1811, we have Tharuch quath Iesus du Petro, Larithana heru in fodder stickel, Thanigaf, mis atta niudrinkothana. In the King James Version, this is translated as, Then Jesus said unto Peter, Put thy sword into the sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink it? We start off with Tharuquath Iesus du Petro thar, where thar is strictly speaking a locative particle, cognate with and often meaning there, but it can also have a temporal sense, as in this case. It is serving as the host for the clausal clitic which we have already met. This time, since it is following a consonant rather than a vowel, we have the full form of the clitic, Quath is the third singular past tense form of a class 5 strong verb. Class membership and stem formation with ablaut to the vowel a in the past tense is determined by the fact that the root quith contains a single obstruent consonant following the root vowel. Iesus is, of course, one of the most common names in the New Testament, but it is always abbreviated. The nominative singular, as here, is written just as is in the manuscript, is. We've already seen the nominative of the name Peter as Petrus, and here we have Petro, the dative singular, the expected case for an argument of the preposition du. Then we come to Lagi thana heru in fodder. Lagi, lay, stands out in a second singular imperative form terminating in a long e, which is spelled e plus I. This is a peculiarity of class 1 weak verbs whose stem-forming derivational suffix otherwise takes the form of either a glide, ya, or a short high vowel, i. Derivationally, the verb larian can be contrasted with the class 5 strong verb liran, to lie, which provides the derivational base for larian. In other words, larian here is the causative, derived with suffixation and ablaut to the non-derived intransitive leran. Thana here is the accusative singular of the determiner sa, translated with the Greek article tein. Not all Greek articles are translated as determiners in Gothic, but many are. The preposition in here can be a little slippery in Gothic. Unlike do, it can govern any oblique case, and its meaning changes depending upon the case governed. In this instance, it's followed by the accusative, which signals an allative meaning into. The Greek original here has the prepositional phrase esten theeken, with a definite article thein before the noun. Gothic systematically prohibits determiners in such positions, and so here, as usual inside prepositional phrases, leaves the Greek article entirely untranslated. The word fodr, sword, as well as the immediately following form, stickle, cup, which we'll see on the next slide at the beginning of the next clause, contain phonotactically rare sequences in Gothic of an obstruent preceding a sonorant at the right edge of the word. As was discussed in the second video on phonology, it's not clear if such sequences should be interpreted as containing syllabic sonorants, or show that Gothic permitted some radical sonority sequencing violations. Stickle, now, is part of a new main clause, but we'll have to wait a moment to see since we interrupt our regularly scheduled broadcast with a relative clause modifying stickle. This is introduced with the relative pronoun thani. This is formed to thana, the accusative singular of sa, with the addition of the relativizing particle e. This causes elision of the second vowel. The pronoun is a masculine singular to agree with stickle, and accusative because it is the object of the verb gaf within the relative clause. Gaf, like quath, seen earlier, is also the past tense singular stem of a class 5 strong verb, in this case to givan, to give, and is identifiable through the same features. In terms of its phonology, gaf nicely illustrates the relationship between the processes of spirantization and fricative devoicing. The underlying root, gib, with a voiced labial stop, post-vocalically becomes the corresponding voiced fricative, va, and this fricative, in turn, is then devoiced in word final position, thereby giving us the form gaf. Verbs of giving can often have two objects. In Gothic, as with other languages you may be familiar with, givan can have an accusative object of the thing given, here thani, and a dative object of a person to whom the thing is given, in this case, mis, which is the dative singular of the first person pronoun, to me. Atta, father, is notable largely for the fact that it contains a geminate voiceless stop. It proves that monomorphemic geminates are happily permitted in Gothic. We now return to the main clause, niudrin kothana. This turns out to be a rhetorical question and is introduced with the negative particle ni, to which is attached the enclitic interrogative particle u. The combined niu often introduces rhetorical questions that are framed as negatives, but imply that the positive is the case. Here the question, should I not drink the cup? Should I not drink the cup? But the implied answer is, I should indeed drink the cup. Drinko nicely exemplifies the first singular non-past optative form of a class 3 strong verb. That the form belongs to class 3 can be determined from the lack of a further derivational suffix, and that the root contains a nasal, in this case spelled with a G since it's a velar nasal, followed by another consonant. The ending for the non-past first singular optative, which was simply aw, and thus seems to lack the glide or front vowel usually seen in Gothic optative forms, probably arises through vowel coalescence. See the 4th lecture on morphology for more details. The direct object of drinko is stickle, the cup, which has been topicalized and therefore placed at the start of the clause and then modified by a relative clause. Here we have a resumptive demonstrative, thana, agreeing with stickle in case, number, and gender, which is placed following the verb, as is more usual for direct objects. This might well all be native Gothic, but in this case the entire construction follows the Greek so closely that it's hard to tell. This concludes our commentary on verses 10 and 11 of John 18, and with it, our module on the Gothic language.
Awiliudum isvis in iswara at sequendane.
We thank you for your attention. Thank you very much for having been with us at this look through the grammar of the Gothic language.
Good luck with your future studies, and goodbye.